Welcome to the Bitcoin Basics Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Stucker, founder of Better Human Podcast Network and the Better Human Company. We're here to talk about a very important concept, a monetary concept, a scarcity concept, and as it relates to Bitcoin, something you need to understand, the idea of stock to flow. So this show is very short, very specific on this one idea. Check out all the other shows for some of the basics. Also, live orange pilling interviews that I do and more to come on the Bitcoin Basics Podcast over at bitcoinwillsaveus.com. So stock to flow. Stock is the total supply of an asset at a present time. There's a current amount of gold today. It's about 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools full of gold is what the estimate is. Flow is how much of that gets added to that supply. Something like gold gets mined. It has a predictable inflation rate. It's usually like 1.5 to 3% a year historically. So the stock to flow is actually a ratio that determines how fast something will double in quantity. So the stock to flow for any asset, production of this thing and how much enters the marketplace, and also if there's consumption, that affects it too, but that's kind of a different topic, and how much there currently is. When you inflate something, when you increase it, it's the inflation. It makes more of that thing, thus the value comes down. Very simple supply and demand economics. So in the case of gold, it takes about 60 years to double the supply. For silver, it takes about 10. And that's why silver is, 25 an ounce and gold is about 1800. How much gets added to the supply and over time for how long determines price, because that determines scarcity. The more there is of something, the lower the price. Now, because gold has one of the highest stock to flows there is, the market for over 2,000 years has defaulted to it being one of the best forms of money. Not just stock to flow. There's also divisibility. There's also the fact that you can't destroy it. It pretty much is always here. When you get more of it, it's going to be here forever. There's a lot of other properties of gold that the market figured out makes it the best store of value, at least until Bitcoin came along. So when it comes to money, you want the scarcest asset and the lowest inflation rate, because if you buy gold now with your financial energy, you convert dollars or you sell a house or you sell a cow and you have these gold coins or a gold bar, you want that to be as worth as much now in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Ideally, it would even be a hedge against other inflationary things, but that's a topic for another day. Let's just say that, for example, I have this silver right here. This is 10 ounces. It probably cost me like $200 because I bought silver around $30. I'm not really buying silver anymore, but I do like it as a metal. Also has a lot of industrial use. I'm pretty much Bitcoin all in at this point. I still have some silver. I still like silver. But when I bought the silver for $200, let's say a year ago, ideally, this would keep that same $200 in purchasing power 5 years, 10 years in the future. And some people buy gold and silver because they think it will actually appreciate or at least not depreciate because the dollars are being inflated. So it's a way to kind of be protected from inflation. That's what this is. There's obviously a ton to monetary metals and Bitcoin and comparisons and the differences and all these different things. This idea is very simple. And I'm going to explain how Bitcoin kind of fits into this with its predictable inflation schedule as well in a second. When it comes to money, you want the scarcest, lowest inflation rate possible because this gives you a predictable way to think about the future. If you know that it's only 1 to 2 to 3% being added to the supply every year, then you can know that gold probably historically is going to have a 1 to 3% inflation rate. If it's silver and it's way less than that because there's way more of it produced, then you price it accordingly. The best form of money is as resistant as possible to manipulation and increasing supply. The reason gold and not silver, copper, these other things has been agreed upon by the market as the strongest form of money thus far until Bitcoin is because it's very, very hard and expensive to get it out of the earth's crust. Something like silver, for example, if there was a big run up in silver, silver miners would actually just increase production because they would have more money that they could spend to get silver out. This would actually result in a lot more silver being brought to supply. This is also true of gold. There's also predictions where we're going to start mining gold out of the ocean floor because apparently there's a lot of it down there. You get into these murky things where you really need to understand the risk. You need to understand innovation, technology, et cetera, which is why, again, for me, this was the huge thing that took me from metals, gold and silver to Bitcoin when I realized that we might have some innovation in AI for being able to find gold deposits, or we might have some new technology where they can mine gold off the bottom of the seafloor and now they can quadruple the supply in a year or something. There's a lot to that. So we can't really get into that. But what you want in money is you want something that has very, very low or predictable flow added to stock, because then you can be relatively sure that Like today, if it's a 3% inflation rate, in 10 years, it's about 3%, right? And really people hold gold because they don't feel safe holding dollars. And that's because dollars have an inflation rate that's much higher. So if you hold gold, you actually lose less purchasing power. Some would even say you should actually earn more, but I don't know. I mean, at this point, I think gold's kind of failing as a store of value, and there's just so many other things, and Bitcoin really is the winner, which we'll get into right now. Bitcoin beats all other money in this way because it has a known supply and a known halving schedule or a known inflation rate. So currently the block reward every 10 minutes is about 6 Bitcoin per block. It used to be 50, then it was cut down to 25, then it went to 12.5 in July 19, 2016. It went to 6.25 in 2020. And then it's going to go down to 3.125 and then so on until 2140 when the last Bitcoin will be mined. So every 4 years, you get half the amount of Bitcoin entering the space. Now, you got to keep in mind that there's also a massive, massive demand for this thing because there's 8 billion humans and they're all going to want Bitcoin. That also factors into, you could say, almost the consumption rate. And there's a lot of things here from a game theory perspective and economics of scarcity to understand why this is the case, because it actually sounds like a lot. It sounds like, oh, well, every 10 minutes, there's 6 new Bitcoin. In some ways, that's true. I believe I don't know how many a day it is, but it's like 1,400 Bitcoin a day or something like that. But the fact that so many people want it and every single day more people are understanding what it is, so more are going to buy it. This is the market just converging on the strongest money ever made, ever discovered. That's why for me, I believe it's actually the safest asset to own. But the thing here that is different from gold is gold has a predictable inflation rate based on history. That can change at any moment. Same thing with silver. Bitcoin, it doesn't matter how high the price of Bitcoin goes. You can't get more Bitcoin. It is algorithmically set. It will only be released on a certain schedule. And in 2140, you can never make more of it. This is not true of gold. This is not true of silver. This is not even true of real estate, which they say nobody's making more of it. I mean, yeah, that's true, but you can tear down buildings and then build skyscrapers. So like there's actually a ton of room for real estate to continually be made more of and grow, etc. Of course, I mean, if you own a plot of land and they build a skyscraper on it, you're probably gonna make a lot of money, right? So that's, again, a lot of nuance here. Today's topic is just stock to flow, and understanding how the market prices things based on stock to flow from a historical perspective and how Bitcoin just beats it out in every manner. It's just kind of amazing, actually. So one very important thing comparing gold to Bitcoin is stock to flow and how one is known and one is unknown. So I hope I gave you a little bit of a treatment of this topic. Like I said, there's a lot of nuance in the different variables. It's worth exploring on your own if you're really curious. It's worth getting into the history of gold and silver and other forms of money that might have had a different kind of stock to flow, or more of them could have been produced, like tea or cows, or big stones on one island could be moved from another island, or glass beads, which were found on one island and it was scarce, but then somebody comes into the ship and brings them in and that just collapses the price. It's really, really fascinating. The history of money and what humans have used and what the market has converged on and agreed on as money, and how that process just evolutionarily, like no central authority, converged on, silver and gold for a while, and then eventually gold went out, and then we went to a fiat standard and the governments took over, and they've been pretty much destroying the wealth of the world and humanity ever since. And that's why Bitcoin has emerged as a way to solve this. It's just another example of human ingenuity, of putting pieces together with this invention, discovery, this emergent decentralized property that makes Bitcoin the most exciting thing I've ever found in my life. So to learn more about this and all the other topics, to get to the Bitcoin epiphany, as I call it, which is when you really understand what Bitcoin is, and hopefully you adopt it as a strategy for your wealth protection and your wealth growth and just human protection and human sovereignty, because it's amazing for that. Most people have no idea how it's actually the Trojan horse for freedom that's going to change the world. But to learn more about all that, go to bitcoinwillsaveus.com. And if you want to learn more about my Bitcoin focused company and how we're going to bring Bitcoin to the masses, especially those in areas that need it the most, that are living under hyperinflation, war-torn areas, dictators, tyrants, and other collectivist, destructive ideas that are keeping people poor, sick, and not able to move forward, and most of which don't have access to the opportunities that we have by having access to the world economy. That's the Better Human Company. You can learn more over at betterhuman.world and get on the announcement list. We'll have a whole product suite of high-quality products to support your life and lifestyle coming out, and every purchase is going to go directly to doing that important work. We're going to have a 50-50 model where 50% of the profits go to direct impact work, It's going to be amazing. I'm really excited. It's what I've finally figured out I'm going to do with my life. And I kind of converged on this after 2 years of not really knowing what to do and just meandering around, knowing I wanted to do something in Bitcoin, but I didn't know what. And then bam, here we are. I kept going. I kept thinking. I kept creating, and I found it. I found the thing, and I could not be more excited. And so I hope you'll join me, at least follow along with the journey, because now it's September 13th, 11:07 a.m. in Austin, Texas. And let's see where it takes us. Oh, 2021, by the way. Let's see where it takes us. Amazing things are in store for the future. And as it goes throughout history, the more chaotic and crazy the world seems, the more the next paradigm is being birthed. And that's what's happening. And so that's why for me, I'm over complaining and bitching about the way things are. I'm over having that negativity bias towards that and otherwise focusing on it. There's plenty of other people that will do the complaining for me. I'm into growth, development, improvement, and betterment of my fellow humans. And that's what I've been obsessed with Better Human, the podcast, now the Bitcoin Basics podcast, and now Bitcoin, which again, for me is a Trojan horse for freedom. It's a Trojan horse for sovereignty. It's the thing that we can finally use to change the world from the bottom up, not from the top down. Learn more at betterhuman.world, and thanks for watching.